to actually lock up, which with this one, it's really very simple. It's almost like playing with Play-Doh, to where you form the hair and it'll literally stay that way if you let it. And that's just how dreadlocks are. And if you put it this way, that his hair is almost like Play-Doh, then other hair, it just takes a little bit more time for it to lock up. And what I mean by Play-Doh is like when you put his hair into a certain form, like for instance, a twist lock. When you twist the hair and it wants to stay in that form, it just makes it easier for that hair to actually lock up, because dreadlocks are essentially just a section of hair constantly stayed within that section within a form in order for it to actually lock up. And it just takes time for that hair to actually lock up. That's why you see people with this hair type, with the 4B or even the 4C, their hair seems to lock up quicker, when in reality it just looks like it is locked up already, because it stays within its form a whole lot better than any other hair type. So realistically, all hairs lock up about the same amount of time, which my rule of thumb is that hair takes about a year to completely fully mature as dreadlocks, no matter what the hair type is. Even if you do instant locks, it takes about a year for that to fully mature into where they look very natural. Now, of course, a tighter curl pattern will lock up quicker. Even if it appears that their dreadlocks are already locked, it could just be that they're holding their form a whole lot better. And that's why you see people with the 4B hair type or the 4C hair type, or anything in the 4 range for that matter, that their dreadlocks never really appear frizzy. And the reason being is because it holds its form a whole lot better, because of how tight the curl pattern is. Because think of it this way, straight hair is the most frizziest regardless, because the tips and the hair itself are straight. So if it sticks outside of the dreadlock, it's going to stick out completely straight. The thing about 4C hair type is if it sticks outside of the dreadlock, you'll hardly even tell, because it's so tight of a curl pattern to where it coils up close to the actual dreadlock itself versus it sticking straight out. Now obviously as time progresses, it looks like he actually took on the form of dreadlocks, especially compared to the last photo we just seen. And it's really interesting to see how these look almost identical to NBA Youngboy's dreadlocks. And it's just because they have that same hair type. Obviously they are brothers, and overall it just looks really similar. And it's just really cool because they are brothers and their hair looks almost identical. And I say it's cool because for me, I have 2 other brothers. One of my brothers literally almost has straight hair, and the other one has about a 2C hair type, and then I have a 3C hair type. So we all have different hair types. But with Bway Yungy and NBA Youngboy, they have pretty much identical hair types and pretty identical dreadlocks. Now obviously NBA Youngboy's dreadlocks are longer, and we do see that Bway Yungy's dreadlocks actually take a turn for the better here in a little bit, and they do look a little bit more different than NBA Youngboy's. But one thing we notice here, what I was talking about earlier, with straight hair dreadlocks being frizzy and the 4C hair type dreadlocks not looking frizzy. The thing about his dreadlocks right here, obviously they are maturing and they're going through a locking process, but there's so much hair sticking outside of each dreadlock, but you can't even tell. And that's because of his hair type being such of a tight curl pattern. Now I can tell because I know what it looks like. But at first glance, it just looks like his hair is completely matured, which in all reality, it really isn't. It's just really going through the locking process. And that's the thing about different hair types. Each hair type looks different wherever it is in the locking process. Which he's in the 2nd stage right here. And if you guys have heard me say the 3 stages, there is the initial locking, which is the method you choose. So say for instance, he started out with twisting with gel, then that's the initial locking. And then there is the locking process, which is the actual time in between the initial lock and the maturing stage, which that leads me on to the 3rd stage, the full maturity, which like I said, he's in the 2nd stage, which a lot of people spend most of their time in the 2nd stage, just because that's the time to where the hair will lock up the most and have the most progression, which is the locking process, which for him, it looks like his hair is fully mature, which on others, say you had a 2A hair type, it's going to look like your hair is extremely frizzy, and it's going to look like it's not maintained. It's going to even look like it's not even dreadlocks. And that's just because every hair type is different. So I want to encourage all of you people out there, when you're going through the locking stage or the locking process, just know that it might not look the way that you want it to, and just know that you're in the 2nd stage. And the beautiful thing about dreadlocks is you're always going to reach that 3rd stage. You just have to be patient the entire time. Now, as time progresses, we see that his tips become even tighter, matching his hair type, which is really cool to see. The thing about a tighter curl pattern is that you can actually get skinnier dreadlocks out of it because your hair is more compact with it being a tighter curl pattern. That's the thing that's really awesome about having a tight curl pattern, is that you can really get really skinny dreadlocks and get away with it because there's so much hair within that section. Versus if you have straight hair, it takes a little bit more of hair and a thicker section to create the actual dreadlock itself. But obviously we still see that he has that freeform kind of look to his dreadlocks, although it does look like there is some sort of maintenance happening to the tips, and it's probably just what he's been doing this whole time with the twist lock process. which is very simple to do. I mean, it's literally just twisting your hair with your fingers, which I wouldn't doubt that he went this whole time without using any product, obviously up until this next picture. So here we're beginning to see that his dreadlocks are maintained all the way down to the roots. Now this is a perfect sign of what twisting with gel looks like. You can see the sheen or the shine on his dreadlocks, which shows that his hair is completely maintained. All of the curls are going in the same direction. He's obviously still going through the locking process, because the more shiny your hair is, the less mature it is. Just like if your hair is outside of dreadlocks and you're able to see the length of your hair and it's all lined up, that just goes to show that the hair isn't mature yet. Because over time it goes through a budding stage and then it'll go to a locking stage. Because as you guys can see that the tips, it's not as shiny as down at the roots. That's because the tips locked up first and then the roots take time to lock up. And to be honest, the roots always are trying to catch up with the tip of the dreadlock, because your roots is where the hair grows out from. So all the new growth is there, so it's constantly having to lock up. So for all those people out there who are wondering why their roots don't look like the way that they want them to, that's because your hair is growing, which is a good thing. And all you have to do is either do a retwist or do the method that you choose in order to maintain that root section. And that can be interlocking, like I said, twisting with gel, or you can just leave it and allow it to become more of a freeform look. But it is really cool to see his hair maintained like this. I don't think we ever really seen NBA Youngboy's dreadlocks like this. That's what kind of draws these two apart. Now, although there are times where we've seen him kind of have a maintained look with his dreadlocks, even now in the last video that we've seen with NBA Youngboy, we've seen that his hair was braided. And it's really interesting because his hair wasn't completely maintained. So it's going to be interesting to see what his hair does after being pulled out of those braids, or just in some more recent photos that we see from him. Now, obviously in this last photo, it looks like it's a couple days after a retwist, could even be after he's wetted his hair. And the cool thing about doing a retwist is that the roots really maintain themselves pretty well. And obviously the tips kind of will unravel a little bit or do what we see right here. It almost looks like his hair is trying to go back to an afro. And that's really what happens with dreadlocks. Your hair is going to constantly be wanting to go back to its natural form, whether it be an afro or just honestly the hair being outside of the dreadlock. Your hair wants to constantly be doing that. And your job is to keep it within the sections and keep it looking like dreadlocks until they actually become dreadlocks. And that's really all your job. If you have a picture in your head of what you want your dreadlocks to look like, constantly maintain your dreadlocks to look that way, and then eventually they'll lock up that way. It's almost like gluing something together. When you glue something together, you have to wait for that glue to dry in order for it to completely mature or cure into the form in which you want it to be. So realistically, you're just really gluing your hair, quote unquote, and then allowing that to fully mature until it completely holds on its own. That's your job, to maintain it in the form you want it to until it locks up in that